Yeah. DJ, thanks so much for taking the time. One of the secrets to your stories we discussed yesterday is it's not just the stories about seven different channels. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and Lisa does too. Um, yeah, and what I think the most interesting part of the discussion yesterday was you've done an enormous job in terms of mapping out a series of places that you could have related business to the bookstore because the bookstore is a driver of attention, content, education, and a whole bunch of things, but doesn't make a lot of money. And you had the capacity resources to do some other things you had mapped out. And I think that's on a larger scale and a smaller scale, a good model for many other bookstore people that'll watch this. So Lisa, so to me, the overall theme is a multi-channel kind of content sharing engagement with a real clear mission. The other part is that you have a real clear mission of not only what you're doing, but of the character of your business and its vibe. So anyway, Lisa, did you want to start though?
Yeah, well, I want to welcome my friend and colleague DJ Johnson of Baldwin and Company Books in New Orleans, in NOLA, and DJ, you have so impressed me and us with your great big vision, and you had a great big vision before you had a great big execution. And one of the things that and the place I'd like to start is kind of how you got started, because one of the things I think you do so very well is talk about is have a brand story, have a reason for being that people relate to. Baldwin and Company has been recognized on NPR, and you've been on the Entrepreneur magazine and multiple media channels, gotten lots of media recognition. As I sit here in Tennessee, I feel connected to Baldwin and Company, and I've only been by it and in its inception once before. And I think that's an incredible feat. And a lot of people share that. You are a destination location, not to be missed. I think, was it Condé Nast that just recently named you as a not to be missed location in the U.S.? So destination. So people are flying from all over the country to come and see what you've got going on there. I want to unpack that a little bit today, but let's start with well, welcome, DJ. Let's start with why you put together why a bookshop, how you got this whole thing started. Tell us your brand story and tell us about you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you, Lisa. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm honored that you all would have me as a guest and interested in my story. I really do appreciate it. I think I just kind of fell into this. And also thanks, Steve. I appreciate you too. A great conversation that we've had in the past. I really just fell into it, and I'm figuring it out as I walk through this journey. But how this all came about, a little bit about my origin story, was that I really just grew up as a boy who loved to read. My parents are avid readers, but I also grew up with a speech impediment. So because I had a speech impediment, I got entered into the speech therapy that required me to read books and almost do sort of like a Toastmasters for kids. And I would have to read the books and do oral presentations about them. And once I fell in love with these stories, and of course, you introduce the world of books to children, and it just takes their imaginations to places they never knew existed. So for me, growing up in New Orleans, growing up in an impoverished community, in an area where the only thing I saw was drugs and crime. I just got to be honest with you. I grew up poor than what you probably can even imagine American kids grew up into. It was so much level of empowerment to whereas, went days without having food, but no clean clothes. We had more rats in the house than shoes, extended hours without power, water. So it just was like, for me, books were that escape. And once my imagination started to cultivate and started to grow, I just wanted to escape to those worlds even more. So then fast forward, go to college, get a great job, living in Washington, D.C., one of the youngest executives in the organization. I think this is going to be my path, that I am going to be probably the youngest CIO in the FDIC history. So I am on an amazing path. And then I get a call that says from my brother says my mom is sick. And from there, just had to make a decision. My siblings and I had to make a decision on who was going to move back to take care of mom because she needed 24-hour care. Is either that or put in a hospice. So fortunately, through my readings, I had read so many books about like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, about just saving and investing and preparing. So I had a nice size real estate portfolio that I didn't have to work. I worked for the government because I enjoyed what I was doing. And my mentor told me because I was a young Black, while the federal government, they have a lot of Blacks that work inside the federal government, but not at executive levels. So I was under the idea that it was my duty to be that example, to be able to show other young Blacks, hey, this is what you can be, and help pull those up. Because at the time, I was also the chairman of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the FDIC as well. So I was trying to work that angle. So I thought that was my path. And then when my mom gets sick, I decided to move back to New Orleans, take care of her full time. And as I'm taking care of her, fortunately, she gets better. And as she gets better, I get bored. And I'm just walking around the city reading books. And people are asking me, it was like, man, why you always got a book in your hand? Everybody would ask me that. I would go to restaurants and I would go to cafes. And people would always ask me, it was like, why you always got a book in your hand? And to me, I thought it was odd that other people didn't have books in their hand. So, in talking to some of the young kids doing mischievous activities around the community, I would say, man, I've been you. I've been that young Black kid that seems to be lost and not know that there's a better way. And I would try to encourage the young kids in the community to just do better. Like, stop with this degrading and degrading your community. They were always talking about gentrification, and I would try to explain that to them. I would try to explain the broken window theory. So I'm talking to them, just trying to educate them. And then that gave me the idea that we needed a bookstore. I would tell the young kids, I was like, man, a book saved my life. I've been you. I've come from conditions much harsher than you, but a book really saved my life. So I decided to open up a bookstore thinking that it could do some community good. And when I started researching bookstores, I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, these things don't make money. So like, I enjoyed my lifestyle too much. I had an amazing life prior to this. So I just had to figure out ways on how to bring in different streams of revenue. So, I got nothing but time. I worked a job for 20 years where I'm up at 5 a.m. and working till 5, 6 p.m. So I was accustomed to working. Now I'm sitting here taking care of an old lady. And I'm just like, okay, what am I gonna do? So I just started working on a business plan. I just honestly, every day, I just started adding and adding and adding to the business plan. And I said, I'm over at a bookstore. I wrote down like 20 different names, settled on Baldwin Company, started going through design ideas, just started researching different streams of revenue, started researching different things I could do for the community. Because when I opened Baldwin Company, I will say this, I had a really good real estate portfolio. So I didn't need money. So the idea of opening a Baldwin Company wasn't necessarily to make money. I just needed enough money for it to be sustainable and for me to give as many books away that I wanted to. I knew opening that I wanted to just give books away. If I could give books away for free, then I would be happy. So
Hey,
I
DJ,
said,
sorry, well, just one second. Hey, George and Amy, would you mute your call because we can hear your echo? Thanks, DJ. Sorry.
oh, no worries. So for me, it was like, how do I build in enough streams of revenue to whereas I can do the community services that I wanted to do? I knew I wanted to teach financial literacy because my background was in banking. So I knew I wanted to be able to do book festivals where I would give hundreds of books away. I knew I needed to do some type of a home intervention program to whereas we're able to get more involved in not just schools extracurricular activities outside, not just kids extracurricular activities outside of school, but also inside of their home. So I knew I kind of needed money to do these things. So I was like, let me build in some multiple streams of revenue. I just need Baldwin Co to be self-sustainable. I don't necessarily need it to pay DJ Johnson's salary. And then that's how the idea came about.
So you've got multiple streams of revenue kind of coming in. I love that can you describe a little bit some of those multiple streams? Because I know there's, you look at events, you look at, you've got rental. I've heard you talk in the past about how you really thought about who you were going to rent property to and how you were going to surround the bookshop with collaborative businesses. So, yeah.
But thanks for asking. The multiple streams of revenue that we have currently at Baldwin Company, of course, we have the books, and then we have the coffee and pastries. We have the podcast studio. We have the short-term rental, which is above the bookstore. Then we also have the courtyard, which is actually a separate property. The courtyard is actually not a part of Baldwin Company. Baldwin Company utilizes that property for courtyard and seating and for events. But that's actually owned by a different real estate company that I own that purchased that, because I ended up purchasing that at a separate time. But that is, we use that for events, private events. It's New Orleans. People love private events. So it's a huge courtyard, nice green setting. You can fit 600-700 people in there.
Wow.
People rent it for events all the time. So we have the private rental space. Adjacent to that is a bar. We have a craft cocktail bar, not a part of Baldwin Company, but because I own it as well. We utilize that when we host events, because now you can have coffee and tea and pastries on one side of the courtyard, and then you go across the courtyard, and then now you can have food and liquor and beer and wine as part of the experience as well. And then in front of that building is a community partner. It's another building that I own, and it's a bank, and was able to establish a partnership with this amazing financial institution that is dedicated to building knowledge and education in community through their work. So those are the, I should say, multiple streams of revenue that we have, as well as some of the strategic partnerships for real estate partners that we have.
I think, and you're really building a community. You're doing two things that I think not everybody can do at the same level that you're doing, but everyone can do. One is that you are leveraging who you are and all the things you know, and your assets, the things that you bring to the table. And in your case, it was financial expertise and real estate expertise. And then you're melding that with personal passion and experience, growing up and your own personal life story and how that plays in, and your passion for changing things. And, I think every bookseller has those things, in some measure. And the other thing you're doing that I see happening a lot, but you're doing it in a very literal way, is you're building a community around the bookstore. I mean, the bookstore is kind of the center of the community, and you've got all this stuff that's happening. Unlikely Story is doing that. Others are doing it in our own little way. Plenty is doing that. So is that in the back of your mind, that you're building a community out of the bookstore? You're changing the community through the bookstore? Am I putting words in your head or in your mouth?
No, I think building the community through the bookstore, I don't know if I can take that much credit for it. I think the community has built me, to be honest with you. So I would just flip those words. But I do think that collectively, the community, we're building an ecosystem of intellectual growth that, of course, celebrates the literature and diversity. So I think part of that the bookstore has contributed to. Part of that, of course, is my strategic partnerships in terms of the things that I thought every strong community has. And it's just being more engaged in the community, like attending the one of the things that I make a point to do is attend my community meetings, be strong in the community organization. And as a community, we're engaged in these discussions to figure out how can we build a strong community together. And I'm just a part of that puzzle, to be honest with you. So I wish
love the word. Yeah.
I'm just
Lisa, I had a question. DJ, we could talk about the business side, which is how all those things feed revenue so that you can survive as a big bookstore giving away books. But what's really interesting is the marketing side of it. I'm sure all those channels feed a lot of attention to the bookstore. Like when we had Paul from City Lights on, Vesuvio's and Specs, which are bars adjacent, have a big contribution to that, Beat Generation bookstore. And the same thing with Cleo's bookstore in Oakland. They're really feeding off the community as well. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear how much, I don't know, crossover promotion, branding you get not only from your own appearances and stuff, but the other stuff outside the bookstore.
a lot. I can kind of go touch on it a little bit. So just starting with the coffee and pastries, it attracts non-readers who may become customers for other services. So people come in for coffee, tea, and pastries all the time, and they may not be avid readers. They may not have read a book in a very long time, but because they're in the presence of a coffee shop and they're sitting across from this row of books and engaged in a conversation with a friend that they're just catching up with, and they hear other individuals talking about books, then all of a sudden they become attracted to books. So I tell a story. This happened last week. A friend of mine, I was in the bookstore talking to him. He just came in for coffee, didn't come in for anything. He's not necessarily an avid reader, but another one of my friends came in and he was like, "Yo, D, I just read Sky Full of Elephants." Because I had told him that he got to read Sky Full of Elephants. He was like, "Yo, D, I just read Sky Full of Elephants." He was like, "The book blew my mind." He was like, "Bro." So we went into this discussion about how both of us love Sky Full of Elephants. So my friend, who was originally there for just a cup of coffee, he was like, "Man, y'all talk about that book like it was like the NBA playoff." He was like, "I've never seen that level of enthusiasm and excitement around a book." So he was like, "Where's this book? Because I need this book now." So he was like, I was like, "It's right here. You got to read it. I promise you're going to love it." And he sent me a text message afterward. He was like, "Man, I haven't read a book in a very long time." He was like, "But the enthusiasm and the excitement that I saw from you and Tyrone in the conversation about this book is making me take this book home and read it immediately." So it feeds into, it attracts non-readers. So we have cases like that happen on a daily basis, not just in my circles, but in other people's circles. And then we have the podcast studio, because New Orleans doesn't have a dedicated podcast studio. Other big cities may, but we don't. We have a lot of recording studios. The recording studios, there's a big board with a whole bunch of buttons that no one really knows how to use. And they charge you a very high rental rate because there's a lot of different equipment in that. For Baldwin Company, our podcast studio, we have nice state-of-the-art equipment, but it's really dedicated for just podcasting. And a lot of people, while they can do podcasting at home, no one wants to invite 4 or 5 different strangers on a weekly basis to their home. So you find a nice podcast studio like Baldwin Company, to whereas you can host your podcast and bring in guests on a regular basis, and you don't feel that invasiveness of individuals coming to your home, of having to find a different space every single time. So we get people that come in. We just had, I don't know if you all know this, I guess it's posted now, so we can say this. I didn't know of the story. You all may know of it. Gypsy Rose. Do you all know who Gypsy Rose is?
Yeah.
Okay. So I didn't know who she was. I got to be honest with you. But apparently I live.
We're showing our age.
Yeah, apparently I live under a rock because everybody else.
Yeah, you're on the other side of the generation.
Yes. So, but we just had someone. What's the young lady's name? She hosts a show, Barely Famous. Do you know who that is? I don't know who that is either. But anyway, they just shot full day inside of Baldwin Company. and they had guest after guest after guest, and Gypsy Rose was one of the guests. But they had like 5 different guests that they ended up shooting. So, but each guest, guess what they're buying when they're in there? Books and coffee.
Yeah.
When they come there, yeah, I don't even know if they knew it was actually a coffee shop and bookstore, but because Barely Famous is shooting their podcast in Baldwin Co's podcast studio, they're just coming in and out. And now I'm introducing them to our coffee and our books. And so many of us like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know they had books here. I love books. You know, I love coffee. But yes, I would love that. So that's that. And the same thing with the short-term rental above.
Yeah.
And when you get upstairs, there's also a little small gift card telling you that you can come back down and enjoy the coffee shop and bookstore with a gift card for you and your group. But it's a $25 gift card. The Airbnb sleeps 12 people. So if you're going down there as a group of 12 people, it's $25. Only really 2 people are being able to take advantage of that gift card, but everybody else is about to buy something.
It's lovely.
Have you noticed? I have a quick question, Lisa. I'm sorry, but have you noticed a change in your inventory because you start producing more people from outside the normal customers, like the Airbnb? Like you're getting more tour guides bought in the store or something like that. I don't even know if you sell any, but the number of bookstores. No, go ahead.
I have. It is. I'm so glad you picked that up. So intuitive. So originally starting off, we didn't have a lot of front lists. We had a lot of back lists originally starting off. Most of our inventory was back lists. But then we became this tourist destination. We have so many people coming in because we were right outside the French Quarters. Where I am, it's a huge Airbnb hub because we are pretty much one street outside the French Quarters. There's a restriction in New Orleans. You cannot Airbnb inside the French Quarter. No one can do an Airbnb. You have to do a hotel. We're one street out. So everyone who wants to Airbnb is in this neighborhood. So we are flooded with tourists. Because of that, we've had to go more front list popular books. And someone left a review that actually made me feel a certain kind of way. I was a little bit upset about it, but they was like, this bookstore reminds me of an airport bookstore.
Oh.
Well, that
should have banned them from the bookstore.
Yeah,
well, I can't imagine that being true based on everything I've seen, because you've got the iconic Baldwin image in books that lots of people use as a photo op, and it's beautiful.
They were talking about the selection though. There was like all I see is New York Times bestsellers. There was like as soon as you walk in, all you see is the New York Times bestseller.
Oh, wow.
There was like I don't see any books that make this bookstore unique. It's the same books that I could get when I'm going to when I'm going to a bookstore in the airport, which is wrong because we have a highly curated book selection. So I disagree with that. But we do, I say that to say, we carry a lot more front list in New York Times bestsellers now than we ever did before, but it's only because we have so many tourists.
Well, and you also have a lot.
I was wondering if I could make a comment. I can't stay for very much longer. Hi, my name's Amy Nathan, and I'm calling just to try to promote, see if you might want to work with Keith Plessy and Phoebe Ferguson. And we have this great book that I think you had it at one point, but I don't know when you hit, because Keith really needed to get a whole bunch of copies for this weekend, because he's doing a big event. Last weekend, they put up a historical marker at the Claiborne, under the Claiborne overpass. And this weekend, they're doing a whole event at A.P. Turow Park, and I.O. Scott is doing a mural there. And so they're doing all this great stuff, and they're not really good at promoting themselves or promoting this book. I live in New York, so I'm not going to be there this weekend. But they would be a great, and you're talking about wanting to start a community. Well, that's what they're doing with their Plessy and Ferguson initiative. They're doing real community work. And Keith has been involved with the Kellogg Foundation. It's a Kellogg fellow for the past year and a half, learning how to do community organizing, to bring communities together. So anyhow, so I'm just saying, this would be a really good book for you to feature, and I'm sure they would come and talk, do a
Amy,
program at the bookstore. So I'm just trying to say that. So
yeah, Amy, I don't know the bookstore, but I know a lot of bookstore owners have a lot of local authors come in and suggest they sell their books, and it's always an inventory problem. And now we've experienced it right on a podcast.
Well, and DJ, I imagine. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, I imagine that DJ, you going back to the backlist and your curation, and tying that together also with this notion of attracting non-readers. And do we have what kinds of, you tell us about some of the things that you're doing to cultivate the local authors and to bring new voices into your space, and to do the kind of events that not everybody else is doing, that are really unique to Baldwin and unique to your store. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we host local authors all the time. I actually hosted the event for that book, Amy. We actually, when you walk in our bookstore, you can actually send someone in the bookstore right now. And on the first shelf where it says staff picks, that book is probably one of the first things that you'll see. So as soon as you walk in the store, that book is there. So I've worked with them on multiple occasions. We're already locked into the community with not just them, but other local artists and local authors. So we do a lot of events with our schools. We have partnerships with KIPP schools and Araya School and Inspire NOLA schools. We just did an event with Inspire NOLA schools where we gave away 4,000 books for free. So we have programs with the KIPP Leadership School right down the street. They come and they just did a field trip where they had 2 classrooms. We had 40 books for the 2 classroom sets. We set up an author talk with them here in our courtyard. We gave them all free books. Also gave them free gift bags and swag bags as well. We have local authors come do our children's story time every second Saturday of the month. We feature a local author and they read their book. My nonprofit foundation buys the book from the local authors. Then we give them to every single kid that attends our children's story time because we're so dedicated to building home libraries. I don't know of a bookstore in this city that does more for the local community than me. That's not necessarily me bragging. I think that's just stating a fact.
Yeah. Well, and you're operating as a hybrid model, right? Where you have a collaborative nonprofit that supports and is supported by the bookshop. And can you describe that model a little bit and how it operates, how it works?
Oh, it's fantastic. I love the hybrid model. So we have the Baldwin Company Coffee and Bookstore is for profit. Baldwin Company Foundation is our nonprofit. They work in a hybrid model in collaboration. For instance, our children's story time that I mentioned, it is hosted by our nonprofit. The staff is paid by the nonprofit. The volunteers are when we give things, sometimes we do have to pay for certain volunteers. Just depends on if we can't get unpaid volunteers. But if they have to be paid, it's paid by the nonprofit. The books that we give away for the story time are purchased through the nonprofit. The food, drinks, those things are also paid through the nonprofit. The entire event is hosted by the nonprofit, but it's held at Baldwin Company. We also do the same thing with the financial literacy. Every third Saturday of the month, we host free financial literacy classes. Licensed professionals, every one of those classes, whether it's on budgeting, savings, investing, home refinance, car loans, 401k management, every one of those classes are held by a licensed professional. Some are in-state, some are local, some are out of state. Just depends on finding the expert on the subject matter. But that is also funded through the nonprofit organizations to be able to pay for these individuals to come and spend 3 hours out of their Saturday teaching a classroom on financial literacy. We also have our book festivals where we give away hundreds and hundreds of books to kids. Each one of our book festivals, we have free entertainment, free music, dance, theater arts, poetry, as well as the free books that we give kids, and it's anywhere from 500 to 700 kids. We just had one recently where I think we had around 700 kids in attendance. So all of those books are giving away to the kids for free, but they're bought from Baldwin Company by the nonprofit. I go out and fundraise to be able to have funds in the nonprofit to buy the books from Baldwin Company.
Okay, so you personally do a lot of that fundraising, and is a lot of your marketing, because to me, one of your professional accolades is that you are an exceptional communicator, and that marketing is something you do in an exemplary way. So how do you do the fundraising, and how do you position the community nationally to support the bookshop?
Well, also, how much staff do you have to do all this? This is like blowing my mind, Dee.
Yeah.
I have a great staff. I'll say that. My staff is amazing. So
How large is it?
It's, I think in total, I think it's probably 16 of us. Not all are inside the shop, but it's also because I have food and beverage as well. So food and beverage, event staff, and that combines the nonprofit as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and then some are remote.
And it's a lot of.
And then do you use volunteers and freelancers a lot as well?
I try to use as many volunteers and freelancers as possible.
Yeah.
And so when you're going to market, when you're trying to communicate and get your message out, what you seem to really be able to work well beyond social media and some of the other things that people think about. What do you think about when you're trying to communicate who you are and what you're doing?
I think just the why. I think I'm always considering, like Simon Sinek said, start with why.
Yeah.
So
good old Simon Sinek. He's up to 50 million views now.
Yes.
Well,
exactly.
and if people haven't read your NPR piece where you talk about, or listen to your NPR piece where they talk about your why and kind of your story that includes Shakespeare and Company and all those things, it's a really powerful story. Is that the story that kind of leads you into conversation with people?
No. So not necessarily Shakespeare & Co. But part of my why is my mom. I think that's part of the thing that leads me back into my why. My mom has always been my why. I got to be honest with you, even before opening up a bookstore, just going throughout college, I wasn't a good high school student. I was a much better college student than I was a high school student. But I think everything starts with my mom. My mom has always been my why. Going through a very difficult high school years, then going into college and really just focusing and studying, it really came back to, I do everything I do. I need to be successful because of my mom, because of the sacrifices she made. My mom was a single mother raising 7 kids in a place that had the highest murder rate per capita in the entire world. So she had 6 boys and 1 girl. And it took an act of God for us not to fall victim to the streets. To me, watch my best friend getting brutally murdered at 15 years old, me seeing all my friends and family involved in drugs and violence. And I'm seeing my mom work morning, noon, night, and day. I would go days and I wouldn't see my mom because we rode the bus, through the public bus. We didn't have yellow buses here in New Orleans. We do now, but not when I was growing up. Children all rode the public bus.
Wow.
So I would go days without seeing my mom. We would go days without seeing lights, without just having lights in the house. We didn't have hot water. When we used to eat, we had to pick through the roaches. So seeing my mom make the sacrifices that she made, work almost 20 hours a day and endure so much just difficulty. For me, it was it's always been my mom. She's always been my why. I've never seen a person endure as much as I've seen her endure. I've never seen a human being as strong as she has been. I remember my mom's siblings, my mom's mother saying, "Anna, why you having all those kids? You can't take care of those kids. Anna, why you keep having kids?" I remember I was playing one day in front of the house, and the police came, and we're just playing basketball. We've been playing basketball all day, and the police comes and throw us all on the car. Throw all of us. We're like 12 years old. Police come throw us all on the car, and they put us in handcuffs, and they said, "You fit the description." I'm like 12 years old. Just you fit the description. White police officer come. You fit the description. Threw all of us in handcuffs. We've been like, man, we've been here all day. And I remember seeing my mom come out of the house and the fear in her eyes. You know, you don't forget those type of moments. Seeing that fear in her eyes, seeing her babies handcuffed because we're told we fit the description. You know, so I saw the sacrifices and the discussions that my mom had with us in her imploding how important it was for us to just not be average, but to be excellent. And to see her get up every single day and work toward making sure we secured that life. That's my why. It's not Shakespeare and Co. You know, I do this for my mom. I moved back. I left my job to whereas I'm one of the younger executives in the company. I'm being able to afford a lifestyle where I go live in another country for 4, 5, 6 weeks at a time. Every year, I just went traveling internationally when I was working. An amazing life. I had a high-rise condo, beautiful view. I'm driving a Porsche Panamera, young, 30 years old. I had an amazing life. I left all that because of my mom, because of what I witnessed. That's why I do this.
She sounds like the most amazing person, and she's part of this now. Is she?
Yes.
She's part of this now.
She started off when she first got better. She started off making the pastries because she just was like, I want to do something. So she no longer makes the pastries, but she just pops in. She's that staple. She pops in, and every now and then she just sets up a table and she's just giving away free pastries. And I don't even know because I don't let her do it. But the staff, they won't say no to us. One day I just walk in and I see her sitting at a table full of free pastries. So,
and you're like, you can do that, Mom. You know,
I was like, what are you doing here? I was like,
wow, DJ, thank you for sharing that. That is so. I mean, that is so powerful and so rich. What?
Yeah, I was going to ask. I was going to ask Lisa. I was going to ask if what the balance is in terms of your success, in terms of your mission versus your, multiple channels and resources. Sounds to me like, it's the kind of thing you can't add numbers to, or evaluate really. But it sounds to me like the mission is more important than all the other stuff.
Definitely, the mission is to use the power of books to eradicate impoverishment, mass incarceration, and bring about equality. It's the knowledge and information. For me, we've always been taught that education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. So I want to help bring education to my community to help cultivate that level of intellectual growth.
I've noticed that you bring in people who also, like you, have these incredible stories to tell and aren't necessarily from the traditional publishing world. They're artists, they're sports, they're athletes. They've got a lot of different stories to tell. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you're really inviting people who may have never been in a bookstore to experience a bookstore for the first time.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think we bring in authors that can attract individuals that may not have ever been to a bookstore or don't traditionally come to the bookstore. Excuse me, because I think it just fosters creativity and adaptability in ensuring long-term growth and sustainability within our community. Those individuals who may not have traditionally come into a bookstore may not have never necessarily been invited. They've never had an event or had a calling that invited them to that bookstore, but they're not necessarily in opposition of going. They just never necessarily had the invitation. So I want to invite those individuals into it because it is paramount to the sustainability of our community, to whereas everyone develops a growth mindset, and we're all now working collectively to develop this community enrichment and intellectual empowerment movement that I hope that Baldwin Company can be a part of in this community. So we make sure that we're inviting people from different walks of life, people who have unique stories, people who can attract different people who may not necessarily be our core audience, but just provide diversity of thought. Is really what we want to promote. We want to promote diversity of thought, and that requires us to reach out to people or to accept invitations from authors or event planners that will bring in different groups of people, because I just think it's important to have that diversity of thought. I think diversity is the key. Like you learn so much from having a diverse school of thought, whereas I think everyone grows.
Yeah. Everyone. You mentioned your staff a minute ago and this diversity of thought and these unique events. Can you talk a little bit? I think you've done some unique things about staff training and to kind of pull in and really develop your staff in some top ways. So talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
So, I tell my staff, I was like, people come in really because of you all. Like, you all make this place amazing. So my staff is terrific, top to bottom. Aesthetically, yes, Baldwin is pleasing aesthetically, but the energy and the environment is built by the people inside of it. And those are my staff. So I knew coming into it that I had to dedicate time, energy, effort, and also professional training to the staff. So we started off doing professional training with a person who was the Ritz-Carlton head of training. She's trained people all across the country in Ritz-Carlton. She's one of their lead trainers. So I hired her, and we would do monthly sessions. Started off monthly, then we went to quarterly sessions where she would come in once a quarter, and we would hold training sessions about hospitality training, interpersonal communication, placement, see something, do something, things of that sort. And then I recognized that a lot of her training was really geared toward like hotel and Ritz-Carlton hospitality. So I decided that I needed a little bit different training. So we worked with her for probably about a year and a half, almost 2 years. She came in and she worked with hospitality training. And after that, I hired a Insight. I'm sorry, I forget the guy's name. It's like, I think it's Insight is the training, but they traditionally train corporate America. So your IBM, your Google, your FDIC, it's all corporate training. I hired them to come into Baldwin Company, and it was I think it was a 6 months training session, to whereas he met with each individual 2 times. Then we met as a group for 4 days. And what that did was it helped find the intrinsic value in our personalities, shaping us from a perspective of empathy, understanding our personality characteristics and traits and how to work with each other. And that was great. That was probably one of the most valuable training sessions that even as a professional I've been a part of. And I remember when I first introduced it to my staff, and I was like, well, we're not a corporation. We're not IBM, we're not Google, we're not Chase Bank, because that's traditionally who they train. It was like, we're not Chase Bank, we're not energy, we're not corporate. This is retail, but after some discussions with them, I said, well, the way these Fortune 500 companies operate are really no different from a customer service perspective. It's really no different than the way we should operate. They operate to a standard of excellence. And I was like, when you think of Chick-fil-A, Chick-fil-A is basically fast food spot, but no one necessarily thinks of Chick-fil-A service as being a traditional fast food service. Right. It's a level of professionalism that is brought with Chick-fil-A. I challenge anybody to say that they've gone to a Chick-fil-A and had a bad experience.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing to get these teenagers to perform so well. I need a Chick-fil-A trainer because I've never seen teenagers perform so well consistently, but they are amazing. But so that's the type of service that I want Baldwin and Company to exude and to have. So that's why I started hiring trainers who would traditionally work at Chase or work at Delta, professional corporate environments.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things that I notice about how you've shaped the model is that, Steve and I started beyond bookstores because we were really wanting to open the walls of how we think about how a bookstore comes together, and Ritz-Carlton and Chick-fil-A and all the things. But then at the root of it, reading and this powerful story, we talk about bookstores having a poverty mentality sometimes. I can't do more. And you've lived in poverty. You've lived it. You know what that feels like. But that doesn't seem to feel like your attitude with the bookshop, even though you recognize the economic realities of how to put it together. You're making space financially for training. You're making space for developing people. You're making space to give things and to make it all work. How would you describe your mentality with a bookshop? And am I noticing the right things there? Is that accurate? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you do. I take it really one day at a time. To me, I wake up every day and ask myself, how can I be better today than I was yesterday? And I try to employ that same energy to the staff. And I say, if we operate at that standard, at a standard of excellence, then I'm okay with it. I had a staff member recently. She made a mistake and she was so down on herself. And I was like, hey, make a lot of mistakes. I don't care. Make them. I was like, at least you're trying. At least you're being proactive and you're trying to find solutions. You're seeing something that needs to be done and you're proactively doing it. I was like, I'm okay with mistakes. I'm okay with you trying new things. I was like, I just want you to do one thing as we continue to go forward. I said, take a little bit more time to think about what is the best possible way to execute this. And then once you determine what is the best possible way to execute it, think about a better way. And I said, if we do that, then we're good. I was like, and that's our approach. I said, we just wake up every day and we just figure out how to do better. Do better than what we did yesterday. So I think that's really my mentality. And that's why it's the future planning. While I think about it, it's not 3-5-year plan. It's kind of like the book by Garrett Keller, The One Thing. I think I take more of that approach. It's one of my favorite books. I have a 5-year goal. Once I set that 5-year goal, I don't even think about it. But I take that 5-year goal. I say, well, what's the one thing that I have to do every single year to accomplish this 5-year goal? And then I say, okay, what's the one thing I have to do every single month to accomplish that 1-year goal? Then I say, okay, what's the one thing I have to do every single week to accomplish that 1-year goal, that 1 month goal? And then I say, okay, what's the one thing I have to do every single day to accomplish that 1 week goal? And I just break it down like that. So the 5-year goal has been set, but I don't think about it again because I'm so focused on my task every single day. And if I do those tasks every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year, then I'll hit my 5-year goal.
What are some of your one tasks? What's your one thing today? I mean, I love that philosophy. That's a beautiful thing.
Today, honestly, it is getting back on marketing and advertising. So I've kind of been beat up from this Ta-Nehisi Coates event. We had to get out a ridiculous amount of people. It's unreasonable. So it was 3,000 people. We ended up having over 3,200 people in New Orleans on a Friday night. So Friday night in New Orleans, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I had a goal set of 3,000 people. We exceeded that goal and had over 3,200 people at the
Oh
event.
my word.
So it took everything in me.
Yeah.
So I haven't necessarily been on my advertising and marketing hat. So today is me finally getting back advertising and marketing. I have to do a certain amount of hours dedicated to advertising and marketing every single day. And I just haven't been doing that. And that's the thing that I'm trying to get back to. My phone goes on do not disturb, and my silence my emails, and every single this block of time that I have is dedicated toward advertising, marketing, content creation.
Advertising, marketing, content creation. That's in your one thing. And, you know, it shows. And I believe that you are doing one of the best jobs in the country, at least the best exemplar that I can come to say, you know, when you're really communicating your brand, then somebody like me in Tennessee can understand and be moved by the things that you're doing. And I am. And so we've only got a few minutes left. I wanted to make sure we made room for at least a couple of questions. Amanda, I see you're unmuted. Do you have a question? And you know DJ well. So
yeah. Hi. Good morning, DJ.
Hey, Amanda.
I had a question about what are your thoughts, or how do you think the publishing industry is doing in supporting bookstores who are doing things differently? I mean, I think you demonstrate pretty clearly that book selling isn't going to finance the good that bookstores do, while amplifying the need that bookstores and community that bookstores provide. And so how do you think publishers are acting as partners in this? And where do you think we can move the needle on that?
It's a really, really good question.
I've been thinking about it for 45 minutes.
I'm glad I asked.
Well, it is a fantastic question. So my mom always told me, she said, DJ, well, she calls me her only son. She said, my only son, she said, you know what? She says, I love your honesty. She said, but one day it's going to get you in trouble. So maybe this is that day, but I don't know. But I can't help but be honest, and I'm brutally honest. They're doing a horrible job of it. It's deplorable. They're leeches. They're not even partners in this. And this is my outside perspective, because I don't have a background in book selling. I know business. You know, I tell people all the time, I know business because I've worked in business for 20 years. I have an MBA. I know how business operates. And in analyzing this business structure of book selling, it is not sustainable. And the publishers are simply leeches, and they're sucking the lifeblood out of the people who are doing the most work. So I don't even call it a partnership. This is an exploitation. And that's just me being honest with you. So I think if any one of us is booksellers, if we're expecting the publishers to save us, to help us, to assist us, then we're going to be in for a very disappointing ride. I think what we all have to do is figure out how to be less exploited and how to get the things that we need out of the publishers the best way that we can. That's my honest assessment. This is not a partnership. I dare call what the publishers have with bookstores. At least this has just been my experience and my evaluation of it. They can do a lot better. That's a different conversation in terms of what I think that they can do to be better stewards of this partner or so-called partnership, and not necessarily be leeches. But I think we're the ones that are building the reading community. Like Amazon isn't building a reading community. Barnes & Noble isn't building a reading community. It's us with the boots on the ground, getting out inside of these communities every single day, doing the community service that we do, building these relationships with words and language and books with people and households and children, and developing the next generation of readers. That's us. And the publishers are simply exploiting us.
And you've gotten several applauding comments in the chat, so people really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I just wanted, Lisa, I just wanted to say to you that when you talked about childhood of rats in the house, more rats than shoes, and picking through breakfast to avoid the roaches, you're describing the publishing world in a way. And guess who the rats and the cockroaches are?
It's well, along those lines, Sherry, I think, is asking, what methods do you utilize to have local authors prominently on your shelves, including indies? So it sounds like you're viewing the publishing industry as, not helpful, not partnering, leeching. At the same time, you're really promoting authors and creative acts and people telling their stories. So I guess, Sherry, that's your question. Thank you.
So yeah, so we used to hold, and we paused it right now just because our event planner who was doing it, we ended up losing her, and we're training a new event planner. But we held a open mic for authors only, so authors can come, and it's in our courtyard, either in the courtyard or in the bar, just depending on the weather. But you have 3 minutes to do a reading, and then answer a few questions. We try to give you 5 minutes, but 3 minutes to do a reading, 2 minutes for like Q&A. And it's almost like an open mic, to whereas a poet or a musician can get up and sing. So, but you have to be an author, and you have to do a reading from your book. And then you can sell your book, and we won't take any percent. You can sell your book and keep 100% of the cost. So at any given time, we have 20 to 40 local authors, and they're coming on a weekly basis to talk about their book, do a reading, and then they sit back in the crowd. And it's just great for building a community amongst independent and local authors.
Wow, that's a great answer. And
How many people, I'm sorry, Lisa. Hey, DJ, how many people attend that each week? In other words, does it build an audience? Does it build an audience? Does it have its own
depending
audience?
because it requires the independent and local authors to advertise as well. So sometimes we'll have 200 people in the audience. Wow. It just really depends on. So if we have 20 people who have signed up, then that's 20 people telling their friends, "Hey, I'm doing an open mic at Baldwin Company. Come support me." And then we have a list, and we call individuals up. They come up and they read. But we have the 10 people that one person invited. We have the 10 people that the other person invited. We have the 10 people. And now everyone gets to hear everyone talk about these books. So sometimes we only have 20 people show up. Sometimes we have 200 people show up.
Wow.
Well, we are 1 minute from our time, and it has flown by. And DJ, you've just given a masterclass in Baldwin and Company, and in all the things you're doing within the book world. We're all inspired. I'm looking at the chat to see if I can convey any other comments other than thank you, and people feeling so good. We're going to continue to follow you. We're going to, this recording will be available to Praveen put together a reimagining bookstores thing with Kepler, and Amanda was part of that. And we did that a couple of years ago. So that whole group, we're going to make this available to them and anybody else that wants to be inspired by the work that you're doing. But thank you. Any last?
Yeah, I had one last question. Sorry, Lisa. Are you writing a book, DJ, about your story?
Well,
you must get asked that. You get asked that every day, probably.
No, I'm a reader, not a writer. I just love to read.
Okay. Well, Steve and I are working on a book on the future of bookselling, and we definitely want to include your contribution and what you're doing, because what you're saying is incredibly insightful, and I think the world of bookselling needs to hear more about it. So thank you. Thank
you all. It has been an honor and a pleasure. I'm so honored to have been part of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, DJ.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Amanda.
Bye, Amanda.
Bye, everybody. Bye, and thank you, Steve.
Happy holidays, y'all.
Happy holidays, Sherry.